I knew I could, and so the original title of the project was The Sundance Kid and Butch Cassidy. That was the original title. And that was because Paul was supposed to play Sundance because he'd played that kind of a character before in film. But George Roy Hill knew Paul.
At 89 years old, Robert Redford, one of Hollywood's most enduring icons, finally broke his silence about the man who shaped not only his career, but also his personal life in ways few could imagine, Paul Newman. For decades, their names had been inseparable, their friendship immortalized through films that defined an era. Butch Cassidy and The Sundance Kid and The Sting were more than just movies. They were cultural milestones, built upon the effortless chemistry between two men who seemed destined to find each other on screen. Yet, Redford has always been a private figure, reluctant to bask in nostalgia or public sentimentality. While Newman spoke openly about their bond during his lifetime, Redford rarely offered more than a smile or a brief anecdote. That silence, maintained across decades of interviews and retrospectives, left fans with questions. What did their friendship really mean, and how deep did it go? Now, with time having stripped away the distractions of Hollywood and left only reflection, Redford's words finally carry the weight of a lifetime. His candid remarks are more than a tribute to a co-star. They are a meditation on brotherhood, loyalty, and the rare gift of finding a kindred spirit in an industry built on competition and ego. Before we understand the meaning of what Redford revealed, however, we must step back to the boy who grew up in Santa Monica, restless and curious, and to the unexpected journey that brought him to Paul Newman's side. Robert Redford's life began far from the glitter of movie premieres and red carpets. Born Charles Robert Redford Jr. on August 18, 1936, in Santa Monica, California, his childhood reflected the ordinary rhythms of a modest household. His mother, Martha Hart, worked as a freelance illustrator and commercial artist. She infused creativity into the home, encouraging her son to appreciate the power of images, color, and expression. His father, Charles Robert Redford Sr., was a chemist and lab technician, a man of science who valued discipline and practicality. Together, they created a balance that shaped young Robert. Imagination from his mother, grounding from his father. Growing up in Southern California exposed him to two contrasting worlds. On one side, there was the glamour of Hollywood, ever present but untouchable, a distant dream flickering in the background. On the other side, there was the everyday struggle of ordinary families like his own, where hard work mattered more than appearances. Redford absorbed both influences, though at the time he had little idea they would collide so dramatically in his future. In high school, Redford began to experiment with performance. At Van Nuys High, he found himself drawn to drama productions, even as he wrestled with self-doubt and the question of whether creativity could be more than a pastime. Though naturally shy, the stage gave him an outlet, a place to step into other lives, other worlds. He carried this interest into his college years, enrolling at the University of Colorado. Initially, he chose architecture, a subject that allowed him to explore design and aesthetics while maintaining the structure and order his father admired. But the rigid lines of architecture soon felt like a cage. Redford's restless imagination pushed him towards something freer, something unpredictable. He began skipping classes, drifting, searching for meaning. Eventually, he dropped out and embarked on a journey that took him far from Colorado. He traveled through Europe, living frugally, absorbing art, culture, and perspective. These wanderings, often marked by uncertainty, were the true classroom where Redford's character was forged. When he returned to the United States, his path was clear. He enrolled at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts in New York City, one of the most prestigious acting schools in the country. Here, under the watchful eyes of seasoned instructors, Redford began to refine raw instinct into craft. He learned discipline, voice, and movement. More importantly, he discovered that acting wasn't about fame. It was about storytelling, about giving life to emotions people struggled to express. By the late 1950s, Redford was booking small roles on television. It was hardly glamorous, guest spots on series like Perry Mason or The Twilight Zone, but it was enough to put him in the orbit of Hollywood. With sharp features, piercing eyes, and a natural charisma, he quickly stood out. Yet, at this point, no one could have predicted that this young man from Santa Monica would one day stand alongside Paul Newman and redefine American cinema. Robert Redford's early career was a slow burn. He wasn't an overnight star, and in many ways, that patience worked to his advantage. In the early 1960s, he appeared in theater productions, cutting his teeth on Broadway with performances in plays like Barefoot in the Park. Stage acting gave him a sturdiness, a sense of timing and presence that television alone couldn't provide. It also gave him confidence. He could command an audience without the safety net of multiple takes or camera tricks. But it was the silver screen where Redford would truly leave his mark. Hollywood in the late 60s was in the midst of a transition, moving away from the old studio system into a grittier, more experimental era. Audiences were tired of polished, predictable heroes. They wanted something real, flawed, charming, rebellious, yet deeply human. Redford fit this new mold perfectly. His breakthrough came in 1969 with Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Cast opposite Paul Newman, already an established star, Redford played the Sundance Kid, a role that seemed tailor-made for his blend of boyish charm and quiet intensity. On paper, the film was a Western about two outlaws on the run. On screen, it was electric chemistry between two men whose camaraderie felt both effortless and profound. Audiences were captivated. Redford and Newman didn't just act together. They mirrored each other, teased each other, elevated each other. In a time when most leading men were cast to dominate the screen, these two shared it, creating a dynamic that felt revolutionary. Redford's Sundance was witty yet dangerous, light-hearted yet tragic. Paired with Newman's Butch, the duo embodied a new vision of masculinity, not rigid or invincible, but layered with humor, vulnerability, and brotherhood. The success of the film catapulted Redford into stardom. Almost overnight, he went from promising newcomer to household name. Critics praised his performance as magnetic, while audiences couldn't get enough of the partnership. Beyond the box office, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid symbolized the birth of something rare in Hollywood, a partnership between equals. The early 70s confirmed Redford's status. He followed with acclaimed performances in films like Jeremiah Johnson, 1972, and The Candidate, 1972, showing he could carry a movie on his own. Yet, it was his second collaboration with Newman in The Sting, 1973, that cemented the duo as Hollywood's golden pair. In The Sting, the two played con men out to swindle a mob boss, weaving a story of trickery, friendship, and charm. The film was a smash hit, winning the Academy Award for Best Picture and grossing nearly $160 million worldwide, an astronomical figure at the time. Once again, it wasn't just the story that captivated audiences, but the synergy between Newman and Redford. Their banter, their timing, their trust in each other. It was the kind of lightning-in-a-bottle chemistry that Hollywood executives dream of, but can rarely manufacture. By the mid-70s, Robert Redford was more than an actor. He was a cultural icon, the blonde-haired, blue-eyed face of a new generation of American cinema. Yet, even amid fame, one truth became clear. His greatest performances seemed to emerge when Paul Newman was by his side. When Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid first premiered in 1969, no one could have predicted the cultural force it would unleash. Westerns had long been Hollywood staples, but this wasn't John Wayne riding tall in the saddle. This was something new, a film about friendship as much as it was about outlaws, and at its heart were Paul Newman and Robert Redford. Behind the scenes, their bond formed quickly. Newman, already an established star, might easily have overshadowed his younger co-star. Instead, he welcomed Redford as an equal. Redford later admitted that he was struck by Newman's generosity, both on set and off. In an industry where egos often clashed, Newman wanted the best film possible, not the biggest spotlight. That attitude laid the foundation for a relationship that would outlast any single production. On set, they developed what Redford would later call an unspoken understanding. They rarely needed to rehearse banter. It flowed naturally. Newman's playful wit matched Redford's dry humor, creating a rhythm that made dialogue sparkle. Even long days on location turned into laughter-filled marathons of improvisation. What audiences saw on screen was not just acting, it was a friendship being written in real time. Their second collaboration, The Sting, 1973, proved that lightning can strike twice. This time, the pair played conmen working a long game against a mobster, and the film's playful energy mirrored the actors' off-screen camaraderie. The trust between Newman and Redford allowed them to push boundaries, to take risks in timing and expression that paid off brilliantly. Critics hailed their chemistry as the secret ingredient that made the movie unforgettable. Together, these two films created a legacy. They weren't just box office hits, they became cultural touchstones that defined an era of filmmaking. Fans longed for a third collaboration, but it never came. Part of the magic, perhaps, was that they left audiences wanting more. For Redford, those shared frames with Newman were not simply career highlights. They were the beginning of a friendship that transcended the screen and became one of Hollywood's most enduring legends. While his work with Newman gave him international recognition, Redford was never content to remain just a leading man. Acting was a passion, but storytelling, in all its forms, pulled at him more deeply. In 1980, Redford stepped behind the camera to direct Ordinary People, a quiet, devastating family drama. Few expected much from a first-time director, but the film stunned audiences and critics alike, winning the Academy Award for Best Picture and earning Redford the Oscar for Best Director. That victory was more than personal success. It signaled a shift in Hollywood. Redford wasn't just a star, he was an artist who could shape stories from every angle. His directing style was intimate, restrained, and empathetic, often focusing on moral ambiguity and human complexity rather than spectacle. But perhaps his most lasting contribution came the very same year when he founded the Sundance Institute. What began as a nonprofit to support independent filmmakers quickly blossomed into the Sundance Film Festival, now the world's premier showcase for independent cinema. Redford wanted to create a space for fresh voices, for stories Hollywood executives would overlook. Under his guidance, Sundance launched careers of countless directors and actors, proving that film didn't need a blockbuster budget to leave a mark. In many ways, Redford and Newman mirrored each other's paths. While Redford built Sundance, Newman poured his energy into philanthropy, most famously with his Newman's Own brand, which donated all profits to charity. Both men, though different in personality, shared a belief that their fame and fortune meant little if not used for something larger. As Redford's career moved through the 1980s and 1990s, he continued to balance acting with directing. He helmed projects like A River Runs Through It, 1992, a lyrical family drama that introduced Brad Pitt to stardom, and Quiz Show, 1994. a probing look at media ethics and corruption. Each project showed Redford's fascination with truth, deception, and the moral gray areas of American life. Yet, even as he built this extraordinary career, his personal life was marked by joys and sorrows that shaped him just as deeply as his art. Robert Redford's public image was that of the golden boy, handsome, successful, seemingly charmed by fate. But behind that image lay a life punctuated by heartbreak. In 1958, Redford married Lola Van Wagenen, a historian and activist. Together, they built a family, welcoming 4 children: Scott, Shauna, David, and Amy. Parenthood was a central part of Redford's identity, grounding him even as his career soared. But tragedy struck early. Their first child, Scott, died of sudden infant death syndrome at just 2.5 months old. The loss left an unhealable wound, one Redford later admitted, shaped his view of life's fragility. Shauna grew into a painter, carrying her father's creative blood into another medium. David followed him into film as a writer and producer, leaving his own mark before his untimely death in 2020 from cancer. Amy embraced acting and directing, ensuring that the Redford name remained alive in the industry. Through them, Robert's passion for art and storytelling lived on, though the losses endured by the family carved deep lines of grief into his personal story. Redford's marriage to Lola, though strong for years, eventually drifted apart. By the early 1980s, they were living separate lives, though their split remained private and dignified. For a man as private as Redford, that discretion was no surprise. Nearly 3 decades later, in 2009, he remarried, this time to artist Sybil Zaggers, with whom he shared a quieter, more settled companionship. These personal chapters reveal another side of Redford, not just the actor, director, or cultural icon, but the man shaped by loss, resilience, and the search for balance between public success and private peace. Through grief, love, and reinvention, he found his way forward. It is in this context, after decades of artistry, success, and personal struggle, that his reflections on Paul Newman carry so much weight. Because for Redford, Newman was not only a partner on screen, but a brother in life. At 89, Robert Redford has lived a life most could only dream of. He has been an actor, a director, a founder of one of the most influential film festivals in the world, and a voice for independent cinema. He has endured profound personal losses and found love again later in life. Yet when he chooses to speak about Paul Newman, all of that seems to fade into the background. In his eyes, the story of his life cannot be told without the story of their friendship. Their partnership began with a film, but it grew into something larger, a brotherhood forged in laughter, trust, and shared purpose. Together, they redefined Hollywood duos, showing that 2 men could share the screen as equals, playing off each other with wit and warmth rather than rivalry. Off-screen, they supported each other through triumphs and trials, modeling a kind of loyalty rare in an industry notorious for fleeting bonds. What Redford's reflections reveal is that Newman's greatest gift wasn't just his talent or his charisma. It was his humanity. He made people better, not by demanding it, but by showing them how it was done, with humility, generosity, and humor. For Redford, that influence endures, long after the cameras stopped rolling. Fans often remember the final freeze frame of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, with Newman and Redford charging into legend. In a way, that image is more than a cinematic ending. It's a metaphor for their friendship. 2 men, side by side, leaping into the unknown together. One gone, one left behind, but both forever linked in memory. As Robert Redford finally speaks up, what comes through is not nostalgia or sorrow, but gratitude. gratitude for a friend who became a brother, for an artistic partner who elevated him, and for a legacy that will outlive them both. In Hollywood, legends rise and fall, but the story of Robert Redford and Paul Newman, two rebels, two dreamers, two friends, will remain eternal.